So what does it mean to say that someone is unemployed, and how do we measure unemployment? First, we have to break the population down into some categories so that we can understand who is truly employed. So we begin with the total population, and the first thing we do is we exclude anyone 16 or younger, anyone in the military, or anyone otherwise institutionalized, such as in a mental hospital or a nursing home or in jail. That gets us to our civilian non-institutional population. Within the civilian non-institutional population, then we break down people into those who are in the labor force and those who are not in the labor force. When we say they're not in the labor force, we're talking about retirees, stay-at-home parents, students, that sort of thing. So within the labor force, once we've finally gotten down to the labor force, then we finally break people down into employed and unemployed. So once we've eliminated everybody under 16, in the military, institutionalized, and anybody who basically chooses not to work. And that gets down to the labor force, and then we have to decide, are they employed or unemployed? And out of this group, a person is considered employed if they meet the following conditions. If they did any work for pay or profit during the survey or reference week, if they worked at least 15 hours per week as an unpaid worker in a family-run business, or if they were temporarily absent from work due to illness, vacation, strike, bad weather, industrial dispute, or personal reasons. So that's how we know if someone is employed. So how do we know if someone's unemployed? Well, here's the interesting thing. If you don't have a job, but you're not looking for work, you're not unemployed. Look at this, the determination we make for someone being unemployed. We say a person is considered unemployed if they don't have a job, if they have made specific active efforts to find a job during the prior 4 weeks, and they're available for work. Okay, so you have to meet all that criteria to be considered to be unemployed. You're also considered unemployed if you're not working and you're waiting to be called back from a job from which you've been temporarily laid off. Now, the second condition is like pilots and flight attendants who are furloughed by the airlines. And this was over 10 years ago when the airlines were in bad shape and a lot of folks were furloughed. They were basically laid off, but they were said, okay, we will call you back when business picks up. So if they didn't go out and get another job in the meantime, they were considered to be unemployed even if they weren't actively looking for work. So that's a little bit of a special situation. We really don't see that as much today. All right, so here's a look at it. Again, just to give you a little bit more of a visual. This in the textbook, they use a little bit different terminology, so just let me make sure you understand. This is labeled working age population. That's the same as what I call the civilian non-institutional population. So that's once we've taken everybody under 16 in the military and institutionalized out. So once we have that, then we split it into the labor force and the not in the labor force. And once we have the labor force, then you split it to employed and unemployed. Okay, so that's the distinction we're making. That's the divisions that we're making in the population. So how do we calculate the unemployment rate? The unemployment rate is the percentage of the labor force that is unemployed. Again, make sure you understand what we're saying here. A lot of people have the misunderstanding that when we say that the unemployment rate is 7%, they think we're saying it's 7% of the total population. We're not. We're saying that 7% of the labor force is unemployed. The labor force, as we've seen, excludes a lot of folks. So what we do is we would say we got the number of unemployed persons divided by the number of persons in the labor force. Just to use some numbers, if we had 14 million unemployed out of 154 million in the labor force, you multiply that times 100 to make it in a percentage, that gives you an unemployment rate of 9.1%. Okay? So make sure you understand exactly what the unemployment rate is measuring, because it makes a difference. Is the unemployment rate a good measure? Well, just as with most measures, there are some problems. Some people, after searching a long time for a job, get discouraged and they give up. They stop looking. Now remember, in order to be considered unemployed, they must be available and looking for work. So once they stop looking, they're no longer considered unemployed, right? When that happens, then the top number of that fraction goes down. So the overall percentage will go down. So the unemployment rate may actually dip down, and it may understate the problem of unemployment. And we see this. We saw this a lot during the last recession because it took us so long to come out of that. And in some regards, the economy is, in some sectors, the economy is still recovering. But we would see the unemployment rate dip down all of a sudden, and everybody would get all excited. And then a couple of months later, it would climb back up. Well, what was happening was that a lot of folks gave up working at one time. They became discouraged workers. They dropped out of the calculation very suddenly. And then over the next few months, the numbers all kind of adjusted, and we got back to a true picture. So discouraged workers certainly create a problem for us in terms of measuring the unemployment rate. And it's certainly something we have to take into account. The Bureau of Labor Statistics actually does an estimate of discouraged workers, and you can look at that data on their website, and the unemployment rate, including the estimate of discouraged workers, can be as much as 5 to 6 percentage points higher, particularly during times of recession, than the normal unemployment rate. So it's certainly something to consider.